welcome friends once again to this NPTEL module on healthcare, handling survey data on healthcare. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about how a surveyor can go to the field and can start for the field survey preparation. To prepare for the field survey on healthcare, the first lecture I have decided to keep it is on understanding sampling base and design. We know that the sampling base and its design is very essential for research, especially in healthcare research, since healthcare is quite important, not just its quantitative nature, quantitative responses, but also on its qualitative behavior or qualitative contents. So, how to have our field understood, how we can design for the survey is important. Let us move on and understand all those things. Starting with preparing for field data collection, it involves preparing a clear direction and guidelines for each component of the primary data collection from the field using the survey techniques. So, in the introduction, I will guide you that it requires number of stages, starting with a clear cut design or the direction or the guidelines, and then we will follow with some logistic arrangements, how the arrangements are made so that the interviewer can able to reach at the right place and can start following responses. Then after the logistic arrangement, we should also understand its schedule, schedule or the questions or the questionnaire. Then there should be a pre-pilot survey, and then pilot survey, and then pilot is a kind of pre-final survey. Then we also need to understand the budget, the extent of expenditure we can able to bear for the survey, and accordingly its timeline is set, and due ethical approval should also be taken before the survey, and some sort of procurement and training about procurement of some equipment, some instruments which are required for the survey. So, they have been taken before, and training to the interviewer or enumerator are also required for the field survey. I will discuss these things categorically, but let's discuss some difficulties or doubts on logistics arrangement. It connects with setting of central or your local headquarters where your target is. Second one is to contact the local authorities where the survey will be conducted, and to decide on the size and composition of the field team. And on the fourth steps, we need to talk about the accommodation where the responsible persons are supposed to stay, their transportation, their security, and also to arrange the copies for their local maps, the road, the exact location they are supposed to reach. So, these logistic requirements are everywhere required in all the survey design. Most importantly, it is start with contacting the local resource to that of the map, in finally executing the survey. It involves with preparing the questionnaire. Some pre-testing of the questionnaire is required. On the next lecture, we will discuss about what sort of pre-testing are essential, how we can have pre-testing of questionnaire for the survey. I will also show you certain questionnaire or schedule files in the next lecture. In this lecture, we are completely focusing on sample base and their design. There are certain terminologies used, certain notations are used in every scheduler questionnaire or in the sampling techniques. We should also understand those terminologies. One is population and then is compared to sampling or element. First, when we discuss about population, we should understand a group that includes all the cases within the study, all the individuals or the objects or the groups in which the researchers is interested. Okay. The entire genesis of your study is also required, and within that we are supposed to take the sampling. The sampling involves the selection of subset of that population unit, and the population unit within the sampling unit we will take the particular unit from the population. That particular unit is called sampling unit or is called element. Okay. And similarly, we need to differentiate all those things very carefully. One is population, then sampling, and the sampling unit, or that is called element. Try to understand these things through census. What happens in census, we usually count. We count the entire population. So, each unit or the population is their sampling unit or the element. In case of survey, we pool, we take certain pooling of the sample. All are not included in the survey. Okay. Some other terminologies are important, like parameter, that is the value of interest, which is gives certain coefficient for interpretation. We call it a parameter. The statistics, that means the information obtained from the sample about the parameter. Parameter is the statistics of the population unit, whereas statistics is the information or the coefficient derived from the sample unit, okay, or from the sample. Okay, so statistics are the subset of the parameter, likewise sample and population. There are some critical assumptions should also be understood, like the first of all, the most important assumption for sample and population is that your sample chosen should have been representative enough. If it is not representative to the population we are referring to, I think your purpose of the sample or the sampling is not dealt correctly. Okay. So, let us discuss in detail about sampling. Sampling basically it's a process of obtaining information about the entire population by examining only a part of it. Okay. The results of the sample are then used to make estimates about the entire population. We select the right people, that is the techniques involved to select right people, then select those people scientifically so that they can represent the the population of our reference. Okay, and the right number of people is also important. It's not just the right people, the number, size, sample size, so that our errors should be minimum. Okay, we can minimize our sampling error. Okay, so we will discuss that while understanding the right sampling size or sample size, so that our error is within the limit with its confidence limit. We will discuss it. Okay, so now regarding sample, once again that is basically the small subset of the population, maybe 10%, maybe 15%, depending upon the requirement, depending upon the confidence level, confidence of your estimation. When the confidence of estimation is expected to be higher, we usually set relatively higher percentage of sample. Whereas in case of in case of census, we are supposed to count the entire population, but in sample, though it is very subset, so it is easiest with the, I mean the sampling process becomes easiest when your population is homogeneous. Okay, when you have homogeneous population, then your sample is expected to be better and going to represent your population. Then usually sampling is going to be better for large population, okay, and large and homogeneous population. And sensors, as I already mentioned, so we are supposed to count. So, this is sensors, we know that that is usually referred to the accounting of population. Even for trees, sensors are there, cattle sensors are there, or domestic animal sensors are also there. So, the cost of making everyone included in the sample, that is called census, is very high. Okay. So, cost is expensive. So, sampling techniques are important. These three pictures show the quality of your sample. First one and the second one is highlighted in red color, that shows bad sample, because your sample is not representing your population. On the first picture, we say that your sample is only overlapping very less portion. You have wrongly taken your sample from outside, and the second one, it is completely outside population have been taken. But in the third one, your sample is right. Okay. So, reasons, what are the reasons to sample? As we already said, that the physical impossibility of checking all items in the population. Cost is also important. Cost, it becomes very expensive in case of counting. Sample results are usually inadequate. Okay. So, better sampling is required. Contracting the whole population would often be time consuming. Okay. The destructive nature of certain tests are also important while setting the sample. Okay. Here again we share that there are different ways of sampling. Just for your example, at this moment, that we have set a population. On the first part, from there we have randomly taken a sample like this, and when we go for estimation about the population, those are called parameter. Okay. Any sort of estimation like its mu, standard deviation, and then population proportions. Okay. SPI, those represents parameter. When we estimate anything out of the sample, those are called statistics. And based on the statistic, we can draw inferences about our population. Okay. Like you wanted to study child nutrition, for example, or why am I referring? Because in the last 2 days newspaper, the world hunger index has been published, and this has shown that India's position has been again slided down to 101 rank. It was 94 rank last year. Now it has been again reduced to 101 out of 120 countries. So now India's child nutrition level is actually at a very low, and it includes your nutrition indicators, your BMI indicators, wasting, stunting, etc. If you wanted to study entire population and observing all the details is difficult. Usually we do it in Indian context. A National Family Health Survey is used to be the best one for calculation, but if you wanted to do it in a small scale and for a state specific study, then some estimation of the national level is there, or the state indicators are already there. They are considered to be your parameter. When you have taken sample, and based on the sample you have collected sample mean, sample standard deviation, sample proportion, so that is P. If now you are comparing these indicators with the population parameter, and those parameters are usually established, usually understood based on literature, based on prior experiences, based on reports, national reports or state reports. So you can have certain comparison, and accordingly you may identify whether your estimation is correct or not correct. Now coming to sample design, which is as per our title of this particular lecture, that sample design provides basic plan and methodology to select the sample. This gives a plan or a design, including its methodology. So, there are certain characteristics of good sample design. Those characteristics are like it should have less sample error, it should be truly representative, and should be viable to conduct the study. That means it should have sufficient budget to carry out the study, and there any sort of systematic bias that occurs should be properly controlled in a better way through the methodologies. Okay, and the results of the sample study can be applied for the universe. The reasonable level of confidence. Okay, some confidence, with certain confidence level, your results must be applicable to a larger segment of the population. Then it is expected that you are having a good sample design. Sampling design process involves understanding the population through the background study. So, defining the population, then understanding sampling frame, okay, then selecting the right sampling techniques, then to determine sample size and to execute sampling process. So, these involves in the sampling design process. So, most importantly sample design, then sampling frame, then its techniques of sampling, right sampling should have been taken, understanding the base of your sample and to execute is important. Then coming to define the target population, it addresses the question like ideally who do you want to survey, okay, and for this answer like we have the persons who have the information sought and what are their characteristics and what should be excluded. When exclusion and inclusion are well understood in your population, then your study is well informed, and I think your target population is well defined. The target population can be finite or can be infinite. Okay, so it might be also infinite as well. In finite, the universe of the number is certain, whereas in other case like when your final study is finite, like your population of the city, workers in a hospital, etc., are usually referred. In infinite universe, your number of items in that universe is not finite, it is infinite. Like listeners of a specific program, throwing of a dice, what it is going to come. How many options are going to come, it's fine, but what is going to come, it is very difficult. So, there are some probabilities involved. So, in that case your universe is infinite. Okay. Similarly, in the example of 71st round of NSS National Sample Survey on social consumption, that is particularly on health, our target population is the whole India, including its states and union territories, except for those villages in Andaman and Nicobar Island which are difficult to access. So, your total target population is accepting these villages, all other parts are included. So, your target population, your study population, your sample. Sample is the subset of other two and it should be inclusive. Okay. What about sampling unit? Sampling unit is about a decision to be taken concerning a sampling unit before selecting the sample. Sampling unit may be geographically defined such as one state, district, village, or it may be a social unit such as family, club, school, etc. It may be individual as well. So, your sampling unit is referred to a particular unit. Then the researcher will have to decide one or more such units that he has to select for the study. How many units to be taken? For example, in NSS it is clearly defined like FSU, fast stage unit, and the census village where the fast stage unit is defined. the census villages in the rural areas and in urban frame, urban, in rural area, first unit is your census village, whereas in urban areas it is called UFS, urban frame survey. And for in NSS we told you that I told you in the last class that our first unit is your census village, okay. And census village, this is as per the reference of census 2011 data, whereas the urban frame sample UFS is from the census enumeration block of UFS of 2007 and 12, particularly in the urban sector. So, that is referred. Understanding the sampling frame or base. This is basically a list of elements from which a sample may be drawn. This includes individuals, households or institutions, etc. Sampling base will have the following qualities. Those qualities are like all units have a logical and numerical identities or identifiers. Okay, all units can be found, their contact information, map location or other relevant information that those are present. Every element of the population of interest is present in the frame, and every element of the population is present only once in the frame. Okay, that is also important. Okay. So, these are the characteristics I mentioned. No element from outside the population of interest are present in the frame. Outside the population, that is going to lead wrong information for the statistics. Like some examples I have cited here, like sampling frame for the rural areas. We have already said that they are census villages of 2011. Then UFS urban blocks, like UFS is your urban frame survey. Urban frame survey is from the UFS 2007-12 data. Okay. All right. So, coming to the sampling techniques, sampling base we have discussed, sampling frame we have discussed. Then let us talk about sampling techniques. Sampling techniques or methods, we have broadly two types. One is called probability sampling and another is called non-probability sampling. Probability sampling, those are also called random sampling design, and in non-probability sampling also called non-random sampling. Within the probability sampling, we have different categories or the random sampling categories. There are simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, area sampling and multistage sampling. Okay. So, these three are mostly discussed, and besides that we have non-probability sampling that involves judgment sampling, then convenience sampling, then your quota sampling, your panel sampling and your snowball sampling. Nowadays people use snowball sampling. So, snowball sampling, especially during the COVID period, it is very essential. Sometimes it is also called as network sampling. All right. And most of the qualitative studies involved non-probability sampling, and they go for their convenience based selection. Okay, that they are also simply called purposive sampling. Okay, then we will discuss all those things one by one, but not in detail. We will address these things in the sampling lecture. The probability sampling design, for the first one, it involves all have the equal probabilities to be selected. Each element has a known probability of being included in the sample. In case of non-probability sampling, each element of the population is not given equal chance of selection. The probability sampling, first one sampling design in first one involves simple random sampling, is also called SRS. In short is written in different books SRS. Okay. Each and every, in this case, each and every element of the population has equal chance of being selected. Whereas in case of systematic sampling, we follow a systematic approach to make them involved in the sampling process. The selection of sample starts by picking one random point in the start. So starting one is with first random point from the list, and then we keep on adding the nth item, the nth element is added, so that the next item or the next point, next unit is selected. Like if your first one is selected, in case of simple random sampling, look at there is no ordering of selection, like they are simply included randomly. But in this case, if the sampling interval is 3, every time you will, if first is, this is your first sample, if first is selected, the second one is selected by this gap, okay, and the third one is selected again with the same gap, fourth one is again selected after 2 persons, okay, again fifth one is selected after another 2 persons. So in this case we consider systematic sampling. Why systematic? This gives a better representation in the sample. But in case of simple random sampling, if your population is very huge, if you have randomly picked numbers, that might be some outliers in the data. So those outliers might mislead your interpretation. Whereas if you have kept all your observation, your population units in a order, and you first set, you have taken from the first group, you have taken a random start, then you keep on adding the interval, so that from each block you are supposed to have certain representation. So that is a little better, and we are going to give better chances of involvement of all the items. Okay. So that is why it is called systematic random sampling. Another one is called stratified random sampling. In that case, we are supposed to divide the entire population into different strata. Like in your population is divided into rural and urban. Rural or urban there should be a clear differences. Okay. And the population is stratified into number of non-overlapping subpopulation, okay, or strata. So most importantly, they are non-overlapping, okay, and the sample items are selected from each of the stratum. Stratum means your small unit, where like rural is your stratum, the urban is your another stratum. Then within that maybe rural you have divided into richer family and poorer family, okay, those are also called stratum. Or we divided by religion within the community, then they are also defined as stratum. Okay. What about cluster sampling? This involves grouping of population and then selecting the groups or the clusters rather than individual elements or included in the sample. So we include clustering of sample. So clustering of sample, in case of stratified, what happens, your divisions are not overlapping and not comparable as well. Okay. Some features are going to be abstracted within that particular category. So that category is of course not comparable with another category, that is urban. But in clusters, they have each cluster have equal chances of being included in the population. Each clusters are more or less same. Like blocks are divided in the entire population. We have different blocks in different part of our country. Those blocks are divided in the principles of cluster sample. Okay. But the rural urban areas are defined not based on cluster. They are different and they are not comparable. Okay. So look at in the picture stratified sample. So, this is clearly different than this. There may be large numbers representing maybe rural of this one, maybe urban areas, but here the almost same numbers are present, not necessarily exactly the but the same, but the features are more or less identical. Now to represent our population through the sample, any out of all those cluster, if 2 are included, that is going to represent the population. Okay. So, this is another way of selecting samples. Okay. Now, multistage sampling, after when we include all possible methods, they are called multistage sampling. In different stages we have different sampling steps involved. Like in multistage sampling, it is more preferred way of sampling design. This is further developed of cluster sampling. The first stage in this technique may include to select large primary sampling unit, then next smaller unit and so on. For starting, starting stage is your larger primary sample, then it follows with sequential smaller units. So, techniques of the sample is usually of random. Like in India there are different sampling techniques adopted by NSS and FHS. So, starting with the large sampling base is with states, then we go to districts, then villages, then households. Okay. Then accordingly different techniques are adopted, and that is why this is called multi-stage sampling. Another sampling method as against the probability sample is called non-probability sampling design. We said that it involves with convenience sampling, judgment sampling, snowball sampling, etc. In case of convenience sampling, people select based on their availability, based on their convenience. Judgment sampling involves the sample based on the judgment of the researcher. Usually the researcher is expected to be more learned, more experienced. In case of convenience, the person has selected this here is the surveyor, the enumerator selected responses who are nearby based on its convenience. Where in case of judgment, it is purposive. The person selected as per the requirements, better representations are taken. Okay. Quota sampling. Quota means certain quota, certain reservations should be taken to include those units in the final sample. It appears to be similar to stratified random sampling. Instead of randomly selecting each stratum, the researcher uses a non-random sampling method in this case to gather data from one stratum until the desired quota of sample is fulfilled. Like for example, male with less than 50 years of age, female with less than 50 years of age, and people 50 years plus, we have divided based on our requirement. Now, in the quota, adult males under 50 years of old should have been included for sure. Okay. So, the quota is that some numbers of adult males should have been there. So, it has taken those one by its quota method. Then second, for example, a stratified multi-stage sampling technique is adopted in most of the cases. Like in our sample design of NSS, we have cited those FSUs, how many they have adopted the stratified multi-stage sampling technique in the NSS survey. They have included 14,300 FSUs from the urban areas. These FSUs are allotted to the central sample at all India level. Total number of sample FSUs are allocated to states and UTs in proportion to population further to census 2011. Minimum 16 FSUs, minimum 8 for rural and urban area sector separately was allocated to each state in that survey. The stratification, like stratification followed, like within each district of the state or UTs, two basic strata. were formed a rural stratum comprising of rural areas of the district and the urban comprising of its urban places of that district. There are soft stratification made as well in the round. If R was the sample size allocated for a rural stratum, the number of substrata informed is R by 4, because they have taken in 4 stratifications. So, sub stratification is made. If U was the sample size for an urban stratum, the number of substrata accordingly is U by 4. For the rural sector, from each substratum, sample villages were selected by probability proportional to size with replacement, and then size being the population of village as per the census 2011. So, they followed the probability proportionate to size sampling technique. We will also discuss that in our module. And size being in this case, they followed the UFS 2007 or the census 2011 for rural areas. Both rural and urban samples were drawn in the form of 2 independent subsamples. Okay. And these are all details we have so far discussed, and we have also mentioned about sample design, sample frame. In the next lecture, we will talk about how to go for the field, how to have a better questionnaire and schedule. Okay, I think I should close here and look forward to your participation in the next class. Thank you.